Hello and welcome to MotorInc First. Today we're talking about the updated SsangYong Tivoli. No, wait. Are we talking about the updated SsangYong Tivoli?
Yeah.
We are. Damn, I got that right. I was not expecting that. No, we're actually going to talk about the Mahindra Zero. Because not even the fact that it's an inconvenient name, it's also something that Mahindra didn't think through, I think, in many ways. But we'll...
Explain why zero, na?
You know it, right? Just leave us a comment. Let's get straight into it. So this is the Mahindra XUV 300 updated.
Yes.
What's the upshot of the update? What were they trying to go for?
I think the one key takeaway in this, all the changes when you account for everything. This car, the 300, used to be almost invisible in the market, right?
Yeah.
Nobody thought of it. People were buying it, right? It was doing reasonably well. But it wasn't in anybody's, like top of mind, what we discussed, does it come up as a reference point? The XUV 300 just did not. Right? And in that sense, this update, which is a midlife facelift, as it were, it has changed that completely. Now, this car is absolutely on everybody's radar. Everybody's curious about it for some good reasons, some bad reasons, but
and you think that there is enough in this that this car will stay top of the mind for the next 3 or 4 years, that this update has to carry it through?
So what they have done is fixed the big shortcomings, the big misses on the car.
Okay.
So that now it will sit in more people's lists, right?
Okay.
And not be dismissed offhand right at the start, saying, if we just talk about it straight up, one of the things was the interior. That the interior looked and felt old, it lacked features. So they've done all of that, so which brings it up into it now has to be eliminated rather than be included, right?
Okay.
So earlier people just wouldn't include it in their list because A, they might not even remember it. Two, then even if they did think about it, there were too many things which would just seem like, okay, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that, let it go.
Right.
Now, that's not going to happen. But is it a good car for most people? That's what we should discuss.
Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. What have they changed and what have they left as it was?
Okay. So the two things, which is like cheap publicity, always for any model, is design and name.
Right.
Great examples like Creta, we always talk about it. Franks, more recently, everybody was like, what the Franks, what's this name? But the point is, when it was unveiled at the Auto Expo,
everybody knew the name.
Everybody knew of all the cars launched there, people remembered the Franks.
Right.
And in the same way, the 3XO now, after the 300, we've gone to 3XO. The name got people's attention that it's weird. It's not easy to say, especially when you're saying the full name. Mahindra XUV 3XO AX5L. It sounds like gibberish, right? It is unpretty to just say it out loud, for sure. And in the same way, the design, I always love it when designs are polarizing because everybody gets into a huff, and even I do, right? But that to me is again a win for the car or for the company.
Especially for a car that's trying to remain in your consideration set, and it was hard to include it earlier. I suppose that mind share is required.
Right. So what was bland earlier today has become outspoken, right?
Right.
Is it a pretty design? For sure not. Do you like it? No. Do I like it? No, right? But is it a design you'll remember? For sure.
Okay.
Is it a design that has got people's attention, as in you will say that, that's an XUV and there's nothing else quite like that? For sure.
Okay.
It has happened. So in that sense, design's job is to make a vehicle stand out.
And become palatable, yeah.
Yeah. Is the design palatable? The simple instance I can give you from our very own example was, did I like this design before I got in and drove the car? No, I did not. I drove from here to Pune, and by the time I got there, I wasn't even thinking about it, right? And in the same...
That usually happens when you're inside the car and you can't see the exterior, right?
It's quite simple. It's somebody else's problem now. Right? For instance, now I'm going to bring up something else. Now, this is the XUV 400, right?
4XO, which equals to the same mathematical things as the same car.
So, the XUV 400 is the Tivoli in its full size, right? This has been chopped down so that it fits under 4 meters,
sub 4 meters,
right? Which was done for the 300 itself. So there's no change to the chassis and all like that. That remains the same in terms of its overall dimensions. But we used to talk about this so much that the car looks so awkward, that the rear looks too small, the front looks longer, all of that, it doesn't look right. But do we discuss it anymore?
No, but see, in Mahindra's case, I think there is precedent for this. And the precedent was set really well by the Quanto. So as long as Mahindra stays above the Quanto, you cannot call them regressing, right? Because the Quanto just looked like the worst thing ever.
By the same analogy, now that Mahindra has stepped forward with the XUV 700, right? This, to me, again, is not the upward arc of that trajectory.
Okay.
This is not their next best design.
This is a flashy backwards thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are having to work with what was existing and work around it the best that they can. So there are challenges, there are inconveniences the designers would have to work with. So like this has a new hood, it has a new face, but the rest of it from the side and all, it's the same, right? The dimensions.
It is a facelift in that sense. It's not a generation change.
Correct. So they've done what they could to make it stand out and all of that. But the point is, it's not really setting, like with every new vehicle, you are looking at a brand and saying, this is their next greatest and best or whatever, right? Does this feel like that in terms of its aesthetic appeal? No. On the upside, what was the worst angle earlier, the rear, is now the best angle for me. The new tail lamps, the way they're done, they are of course connected and all of that, but the way they kind of stick out of the bodywork, the lines there, that looks modern, that looks cool.
Okay.
So there's nice stuff happening there. At the front, just some details. There's the whole headlamp, grille, that entire section is blacked out. It does have a few modern touches like that. It feels like a closed off grille. Yeah, that's basically what I'm gonna stop at for design.
So does the design have X factor or not?
X factor? Yeah, it does, definitely has, because you can attribute any value to X. So it does.
I love how much maths has already happened on this MotorInc First. I love it.
So, yeah, I mean, it has the X factor. What that means and what it stands for, you figure it out.
Let's move inside the car. How's the cabin change?
Yeah, so this is the big change, right? But as we saw with the XUV 400, sorry, before we move in, this car now gets 17-inch wheels again.
We'll come back to chassis.
No, well, there's a reason for it. This is a point that must be stressed. It's amazing that it's so easy to miss this, right? You started with the Tivoli. Tivoli is actually from a segment above.
Right.
It's a bigger sized car,
yep.
Right? It's working in the sub 4 meter space by being forced into it, right?
Correct.
By chopping off the boot. But otherwise, in terms of dimensions, this has always been a bigger car, and it feels that way on the inside as well. So which we'll talk about on the inside.
Right.
So which is why it's wider, which is why the 17-inch wheels is like, it's going back to saying, yeah, I'm actually a bigger car. I deserve 17-inch wheels, so it's gone back to that.
Okay.
Right? So on the inside, since we're talking about size and all, as before, spacious car.
Okay.
You get the sense that it's a bigger car than all the other sub 4 meter SUVs, and it should, right?
Okay.
Windscreen is tall, windows are large, it's got that nice flat line of the windows, so it feels spacious.
Okay.
The shortcomings as before, the back seat, while it's wide, while you have space, it's not the most comfortable. It's still low.
Is it the same seat as before?
It's the same as before.
Okay.
Like there's no change. Now, what you are getting here in terms of the aesthetic improvements and all, the one thing that wowed everybody with this top spec AX7L that we are driving is the white leatherette interior. It just looks lavish because of that.
Right.
So, I mean, everybody looked at it and said, wow, this looks and feels.
Yeah, I remember when the Safari had the all-white interiors also, everybody had the same reaction just because of the white interior. And I think if you had black, grey, tan, it would immediately depress your idea that, oh, okay, this is not such a luxurious car. Fair enough.
Correct. Okay. So, and this is like white, not even like cream or beige or whatever. It looks like, wow.
Okay.
So, that's one change. Backseat, we've spoken, it's the same, right? In the front, as we saw with the XUV 400, the center console, the redesign. So that's applied here as well because they're the same car. You get the dual digital display. So all of that which we saw with the XUV 400, which has come from the XUV 700, has made its way here. And in terms of equipment, you can pretty much think of this being as on par with the 700, right?
Oh, really?
The dual digital screens, it looks the same, right?
Adrenox.
Yeah, Adrenox, yeah. It gets
More X's in this story coming.
it also gets that sunroof, which is it's not panoramic, but there's a sunroof. It gets ADAS level 2, whereas rivals.
Which you turned off immediately.
Yeah. I just tested it because I should be able to at least say I used it, which I did on the expressway. And there was something interesting that we'll talk about it.
Okay.
So the interior to me, again, feels like they're making the best of the situation, right? That center console, in some ways, yeah, with all the piano black and everything, it looks coolish.
Yeah.
But it's still got, the design just feels a little old as well.
So it's not the best in class, but it's the best that they could have done with what they've got.
I don't know why they had to do some of the things. Like we even spoke about this for the 400, right? The overly chunky buttons.
Yeah.
Like they're that big, right? It's like, I don't know why it had to be that big. Easy to use, yeah, but it looks a little strange.
Okay.
And at the same time, if ease of use was the top criteria, why do they still retain those ultra slim
I remember
buttons?
this discussion.
So those kind of things.
Okay.
In terms of the hardware, the screens look sharp, look good, but the thing that we'll come back to on the electronics front is consistency.
Okay.
So that experience is not on point.
Okay.
Right? So for instance, this gets a 360-degree camera. Awesome, right? Useful, 100%, but as useful as you'd like, as useful as you'd expect for a modern car.
But they haven't meshed the graphics together properly?
It's laggy.
Oh.
So my vehicle has already moved, but it's not been represented on the screen. In that sense, it's not useful to me, right? We're seeing those inconsistencies.
So there's X seconds of lag between you doing something and the image actually updating to show it.
X is an excellent one to use here because it's not consistent.
Oh God.
Right? So the same thing happened even with the screen boot ups. Most of the times they just work fine, all okay. But one time I was like, I started the car, I want to drive and I'm waiting for the screens to kind of load. I don't know, that happened the one time.
Are they running Windows? No, Windows can be like that sometimes.
So that inconsistency is the thing that takes away from this experience.
Okay.
Right? Because for it to, I think this we've discussed again and again, it's when an experience breaks that you get the letdown.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that stays with you, right? So the inconsistency, as we're talking about the cabin, I'll also point out about the air conditioning system.
Okay.
Right? So it's a dual zone air conditioning system, great. But the inconsistency here was strange. Like, I'm not very fond of air conditioning. So typically when I'm in a car, I'll set 24 and just leave it at that, right? Or kuch nahi. In this, when I set it at 24, sometimes it wouldn't cool. Sometimes it would cool. So I thought maybe it's hot, right? So maybe it just needs more juice. So I started using it at 22. And the other day when I was driving, and this was at night, I was going to Andheri, right from office. And at night, at 22, it wasn't cooling the cabin well enough, right?
Oh.
But the next morning, when I was driving back to office, right, same, 22, all the settings same, it was cooling the cabin.
Maybe they've loaded AI into the air conditioning and the AI decides when it should cool and not cool.
Whatever it is, I think air conditioning is not something that should be rocket science. I press a button, it works, and that's it.
And in today's day and age, to mess up air conditioning takes some spectacular amount of work.
So I'll throw that one caveat out now that, okay, these are the pre-production cars, etc., etc.
Fair.
So hopefully this is not an issue in production cars, but this is not something we've experienced in the past either, something like this. So it's strange.
It sticks out to me because I can't remember the last time anybody complained about air conditioning outside of my car has a giant sunroof so I don't get cooling at the back. Outside of that, I've never heard air conditioning show up in this conversation.
We have some cars like we spoke of the VWs, the Tygoon and the Kushaq and all those, right? Their air conditioning systems are not strong enough to deal with our summers.
Yeah.
They take a long time to cool. But that's consistent. You know that. If you've left your car out in the sun on a hot afternoon, when you come in, you will take 20 minutes to cool the cabin down properly. Which is fine. You know that that's a given.
Right.
Here, I don't know what it's doing.
Okay.
And that's the bothersome part. Right?
Very strange.
Yeah.
Very strange. I suggest that you guys look at other people reviewing the 3XO and see if this air conditioning thing pops up everywhere else, because if it is inconsistent, it should show up because it's like a sore thumb sticking out.
The only consistency in this is that we drove the turbo petrol, the top spec, the TGDI, and the diesel, and this happened in both. Right?
That's worse.
So
Depending
whatever it is, it happened in both. It's not a one-off that it happened in this car and that's it. We drove 2 cars and it happened.
That's
in
okay. I
both.
just buy this car only for the winter and I won't use it in the summer. I'll use
But
my
there's
other
no guarantee
vehicles.
that in the winter you don't need the AC. That way. Okay. Yeah.
Except that in Mumbai, you're going to need the AC the whole year. So.
Yeah. And all you'll have to do is move to Delhi then to enjoy it that way.
They haven't renamed Delhi to Delhi yet, no?
Nahi Delhi. Anyways, so cabin, that part, seats, great. The front seats, nice.
And Mahindra always does good seats. I think for a long time they've done good seats.
I think they've been doing some great seats and continues here with the XUV 3XO. Seats might be a little narrow for people who are broader, but they're nice, good seats. What you do not get still.
Did he just body shame people?
Did I?
No, he didn't. He did. Hey, come on, guys. No, he didn't.
Maybe. I mean, today it doesn't take much to.
Yeah. Can't wait for that day to hit.
The day that happens, that means you can do all the time. You can.
No, that day we'll just go into quantified measurements. If you have a 42 chest, the seat will fit you fine. If you have a 46, you're going to feel narrow. Whether 42 is good or bad, now you deal with that.
So the seats fine.
Okay.
You still don't get ventilation function
Right.
for the seats. The seats are still not powered in any form or fashion. Now all this stuff is becoming more and more common in these segments as well.
Okay.
So I think now we're at that point where ventilation function is no longer seen as a luxury and more people will want it.
Yeah, there are motorcycles with heated and cooled seats now. Yeah. How can a car of this segment and this price not have one?
So it's still missing out on those kind of features which are wow and which people would want, are looking for.
Okay.
So it's still not like top of the rung on this front.
Okay.
Right. Space is its forte. Boot. Boot was always on the smaller side in this. It is also a bit inconvenient because then it becomes a slightly slim shape, right? And the boot is high. The loading lip is quite high, so that it remains as before. You'll have to be a little clever with how you pack in. Is it unusable? Not so. It's just a little bit of inconvenience.
Got it.
Right. So we've spoken about the exterior, how that has got people's attention. We've spoken about the interior, the sense of lavishness and the basics in place. Oh, I forgot. It gets an Harman Kardon sound system.
Okay.
Pretty good. So not like one of those usual token sound systems.
And as we said on First Time Car Buyers, the podcast, don't worry too much about the sound system. Yeah. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. You can always upgrade later. Absolutely. It's not a crisis. It's not an emergency. So you're okay.
So we just as a ballpark, did it feel as good as the Sonnet? Not sure, but
close enough.
But that's exactly it. It's close enough.
So the difference is a factor of X. Just we don't know what the X factor is on the sound system front.
Yeah, well done, well played. Right. So now onto the road. So again, the head.
1 second. How quiet is the cabin?
How quiet is the cabin?
Yeah.
Pretty quiet.
Except for the seat belts.
Oh, did this chime? No, it did not.
Huh?
It did not chime.
A car of this segment with actual load sensors? Come on, Kartik. Surely.
Yeah, so in this, it's not. It did.
Surely
it didn't beep. No, it is.
It has load sensors.
I don't know whether it has load sensors or not, but it's got that logic in place so that it's not when you get going.
Well done, Mahindra.
Yeah.
Well done. I see you.
And the other thing I missed out, which I would like to talk about, right? The rear. Remember we spoke in the XUV 400, it had that strappy seat back pockets with string, which was funky and
and good for carrying pieces of paper around. Yeah.
So it was useless in that regard, but it was cool. I really liked that design aspect of it. And sometimes design just needs to be crazy. That it's impractical, but it makes you think that, whoa, that's nice. It's gone away. So
you get normal pockets now?
Yeah, now you get normal seat back pockets.
So therefore the design didn't actually work, did it?
So you win. They've taken it out. They made it practical.
Yeah, because look, design aesthetically is one side. Design working is a very important part of it. If it aesthetically works but doesn't do its own job, it's not good design. It's a designer who's been allowed to play with a pencil.
Yeah.
And that doesn't amount to much.
And for seat back pockets, I think it's allowed.
It
doesn't change my life much.
No, it does.
Okay, fine.
You guys are always driving, so you always forget that there are people in the back who need the conveniences because it's essential.
On that note, this is going to be a strange thing to say, but I absolutely love the XUV 300, 3XO, 400 because, not because, I love one aspect of them, the door pockets. If anybody wants to see how door pockets should be done, it's these door pockets.
Exemplary, yeah?
They are so good. They're really so good.
Exemplary, yeah?
I missed that one. Please,
I
guys.
made sure he didn't.
Okay, so like really like, and this is like textbook for me, right?
Okay.
You have 2 slots for bottles or whatever,
Right.
slightly different sizes,
Water bottles and soft drinks only.
and there are slots between them. I mean, slight plastic intrusion so that they are slots,
Right.
separate slots, and then it slightly narrows down. So when you want to put, like I was putting my sunglass case, so it tucks in there. It's not sliding around.
Oh, very nice.
So very nicely done door pockets. So that, amazing. I love it, right? I've noticed it in all the cars, like in the 400 and now in the 3XO again. And it always feels like, that's great.
Awesome.
Small and thoughtful.
And when small details work out like this, like when they fit your life exactly, I think it always helps.
Which helps me forget that the cup holders between the front driver's seat are a little useless because they're quite shallow. They're like that much. So I wouldn't want to actually put a fully loaded...
shallow cup holders and wide seats on the XUV 3XO AX7L is just a bad idea, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't put
because
them there.
it's like an espresso stain waiting to arrive.
You will have coffee color interiors there.
It will have the patina of time.
Oh, the patina of time was growing already.
Oh
okay.
no, are you serious?
Yeah, because those seats are like light.
Okay, so let me distract you for a second here. If you do buy a car with these kind of white interiors, is it difficult to just get them professionally cleaned or whatever and restore the whiteness, or is this just, like you said, for the ultra soft ride quality on the Buying Your First Car podcast, it's something that really works in the showroom and then it'll mess your life?
It can be cleaned.
Okay.
How often are you going to take it for it to be professionally cleaned?
Right.
Is the question.
Okay.
Right? Because already in the 1,000-odd kilometers that this car's done, you can see on the seat edges, because that's typically, the side bolstering of the seat base, right? Which is where the most amount of contact is as you're getting in and out. You can see that there's slight graying of that area, right?
Okay.
Can it be cleaned? For sure, you can clean it, right? You just will have to be diligent about it.
Okay.
Because, like for instance, my Ignis, right? When I bought it, my concern was, on the dash, it has the white, right? The plastics are in white, contrast black and white, right? And I was like, this is going to get messy, right? Now the car is over 5 years old. Have we ever had to sit down and say, oh, that needs to be cleaned up? No.
But
right?
It's not a high contact area.
Correct, right? Whereas on the seats, and even if I'm not wrong, like with the Creta, right? They haven't done one shade throughout, right? They've kept the sides slightly different shade. So you use a little bit of that contrast to help, where the high wear or high contact areas are just a little bit...
It's okay, you guys are going to put seat covers on this anyway. You'll buy the white car and say, wow, that looks lovely, and then put some... And unfortunately, I haven't seen some really classy seat covers at all. Whatever I've seen so far looks fairly low rent. So you're going to put low rent seat covers on top, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and this car has 6 airbags.
When there are airbags built into the seats,
yes,
do seat covers interfere with that?
Which is why you need specific seat covers, which are designed for the airbag that's built into the seat. So you need a design for that.
फटेगा तो वहीं फटेगा जहाँ से airbag आएगा.
It has to be. It's designed to give way from there, right?
Right. Because I was reading something from the NHTSA yesterday. That's the US Highway and Traffic Safety whatever
authority,
and they were saying that they have renewed publicly a request to manufacturers to not put stick-on logos on the steering wheel boss.
Okay.
So if you notice, a lot of steering wheels now have embossed logos which are built into the plastic. But there were in the past a lot of, and still today, a few logos which are chrome finished, plastochrome things which are stuck onto the boss.
Ding.
When the airbag explodes, that logo might be, as far as I can tell, separated from the boss. So the boss opens to let the airbag go, but it's so violent that it can dislodge this plastochrome piece, and now it's between you and the airbag, possibly causing harm.
It's like a projectile before the airbag comes out.
Correct. Yeah, and everything in your car that is loose is a projectile in a crash. So which is why leaving stuff randomly around the car is not the smartest thing to do. I was watching a video yesterday where somebody had a pair of metal bungee cords lying on top of the dash under the windshield. And they had a situation, it was a dash cam type of video. And I'm honestly telling you, I didn't see any of the video. Okay? I was just focused on the bungee cords because I know that those bungee cords with the metal hooks, they'll take your eyes out if you're not careful, right? And he's got just like a pair of them lying loose on the dash. And I was like, whoa, I don't want to see this. Anyway, long detour has happened.
Yeah.
Let's come back to the car. We've not spoken about engines, driving, suspension comfort.
Yeah. So before we even get to that, the digital experience aspect of it, right? 360-degree camera feed on the driver's instrument cluster, nice in the middle,
Right.
Good, all of that. For all the systems being borrowed from the XUV 700, there is something that felt strange on this car, and you see it as soon as you get going,
Okay.
right? Which is the warnings that it gives, right?
Okay.
So as usual, you have the adjustable chimes for the turn indicators, which are beep, 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 or tonk, tonk.
And you select one of these two.
Yeah, and you can adjust volume, right?
Of the
chimes.
Can you turn them off?
No, that's the problem.
Is that a law thing?
Yeah, it will be the chimes have to happen. But again, there's inconsistency in that.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, so at one time I had the indicator on and the chimes were off. And then in the middle of the turn, suddenly it comes on. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Right?
Yeah, I remember driving a Trax Gurkha a long time ago that had this kind of inconsistency with the wipers. If the wipers were off, now and then it would just remind you, hey, I have wipers once.
Are you serious?
And we were so amused we loved this car because it was so rugged and it was so wrong for anybody to buy as a personal vehicle at that point of time. I'm sure they've come a long way. But this wiper thing was really crazy because you're just driving along, dry day, wet day, whatever. You're nowhere, no hand has gone anywhere close to the wiper switch. And every now and then it would sort of wake up and it's so funny.
So anyways, thankfully that's not an issue here. Wipers they just work as they're supposed to, thankfully. So the chimes are annoying.
Both of them. The pip and the talk both are annoying.
I wish I could go even lower in terms of volume.
Okay.
It would be great. And then of course the inconsistency factor that we again spoke about. What's really annoying though is the parking sensor warnings.
Okay.
They are all over the place. Not only are they too sensitive and too worried, because invariably when you're moving in a tight spot and you're not expecting something to go off, right? And this is doing that, it just kind of startles you, right? Like you're not expecting anything there. I can't see anything on the camera, but it goes off. So like what happened once was when we were driving, we were parked at a signal. It was under a flyover. So to my right is the flyover. I'm parked at the signal behind another car. And there's literally nothing around us that's moving because we are cars all parked together. And then the warning goes off from the flyover side. There's nobody there, right? It's sensing movement.
Can we cue the X-Files music at this point of time? Does this car have ESP?
Of course. Yeah.
Does the car have ESP?
Yeah, not that kind of ESP.
So it's not the electronic stability program. This is the extra sensory perception. The car is seeing X-Files on the right side happening.
Well done.
Maybe
another neat integration of X.
Maybe it has such strong sensors, it recognized that there was a threat on the other side of the flyover. How would you know?
So, I mean, these are the things that we didn't see in the 700, and that they are here is strange, right? I even switched off the park distance warning, and even then, every now and then, it would just pop off for some reason.
So there are electronic glitches for sure on this car.
Oh, which I missed the biggest one. So this is the top spec variant that we are driving.
So that's the AX7L.
Yes, correct. But it doesn't get Android Auto, Apple CarPlay as of now.
What do you mean as of now?
They're getting certification. They've got certification for the lower variants all the way up to the AX5. But they have not got it for the AX7. And even then, it's not wired Apple CarPlay. I think there's something between...
Even it's not wireless?
Sorry, it's not wireless. I think the Android Auto will be wireless and Apple CarPlay will be wired, something like that. Yeah. And that's why that screen, the infotainment screen right now felt completely useless because that's the one thing you want, right? I mean, if you ask me, the only reason I want a screen in my car today is because now I've gotten used to navigation more than anything else. It's for the navigation. And some of you commented, and it was brilliant, right? The new car buying podcast, right? Somebody said that I want a screen because you know what? I do use my phone and I use a mount to put it on the windscreen and drive around, but the phone gets really hot, right? And today, in current conditions, you would think about that as well.
Of course.
Because it is hot. And if it gets so hot that your phone actually conks off, it's not going to be of help, right? So in that sense, the reason to have a touchscreen in the car today for me is navigation.
Right, period.
Right?
Yeah.
For that, I would want it. And that's the one thing I don't have in this right now.
Got it.
Right? Resolution of screens and all was good. But anyways, back on the road, to drive, these chimes and alerts were annoying.
Intrusive.
they do spoil the experience, right? This is not something I'd want to deal with every day. And using it with the ADAS system, the ADAS throws up its own set of warnings every now and then. It'll say no overtake zone, 30 kilometers, this, that. So it's already flashing something at you through the instrument cluster, all of which is a little...
Why can't we have a more peaceful cabin?
Exactly.
Because I think if this car will go to reasonably new drivers, if not new drivers, because if I remember your budget suggestion from that podcast, you said 7 to 10, 7 being okay, 10 being lots of choice. This car, I believe, sits in that price bracket.
It starts.
But if this car is going to just constantly make you worry by throwing warnings at you.
Shumi, excellent point, because see what they've also done, and that's the other part of the, that, like I said, that this car, nobody's going to ignore. The design, yes. The cabin experience, yes. And the other thing is the price.
Yeah.
Is it at the higher end, is it the cheapest in its segment? No, it's not. But at the lower end, starting at 7.5 lakhs, what they're offering you for that money, this size of car, with that, even the base engine is a turbo petrol, which is also a quick engine, right? Is really impressive, right?
Except that it will warn you about everything and their uncle.
So the good thing is, in the lower variants, you won't get ADAS, you won't get 360-degree camera. So all this stuff, this noise will not be there.
But think about what Kartikeya implied there, okay? He's basically saying the more features we took away from the 3XO, the better the cabin experience got. Which should also tell you that Mahindra is unable to articulate the experience of the cabin well, because the ADAS guy basically designed their own set of warnings. The indicator guy did their own set of warnings, and the integration of the experience hasn't happened. So this is an extremely noisy cabin in the sense of, not that I'm going to hear the engine and hear the exterior. It's just this car is busy talking to you the whole time.
Yeah.
And as a person who's very talkative, I know that it can be really annoying. What? It's true. I mean, not I am annoying. It can be annoying to have another talkative person in the room.
On that note, moving on to driving.
Yeah. What are the engines?
Oh, sorry. Price, right?
Yeah.
One thing worth pointing out, and definitely for which Mahindra deserves credit, is like even the base engine, right? The turbo petrol, the automatic that it gets is the new 6-speed torque converter.
Okay.
Earlier they used to have the AMT for that. Now they have a nice automatic, which we've used with this top end. So, okay, this needs clarification.
Yeah. I think first let's talk about what engines and transmissions before we talk about.
Correct. We should do that. Sorry. So the base engine is the turbo petrol.
Okay.
With a 6-speed automatic option.
Okay.
You have the turbo diesel.
Okay.
Which is available with a manual or the AMT. And then there's the top spec engine, which is, the top petrol, which is also a turbo petrol, but this has direct injection. So it's the TGDI. So more sophisticated. Why? Somebody asked, what's the difference, right? Port injection versus direct injection. Direct injection means the fuel is being sprayed directly into the cylinder. What that does is gives more precise fueling, as it's called, which means you have more control, which reduces emissions, improves responsiveness. So it's more sophisticated. It's for cleaner emissions. It's for the future. That's why it's been created. It will be used more for a longer time than the non-TGDI version, right? Both the petrols get the same 6-speed automatic.
No manual.
Manual is there, of course.
So diesel, petrol, you talked about 3 engine spec.
Correct.
All 3 engine spec have a 6-speed manual.
Correct.
But the automatics change.
Correct.
So you get a 6-speed auto on the base, you get a 6-speed auto on the top petrol. The diesel gets?
AMT.
Gets an AMT.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Now in this, the base engine is not available in the top spec variants.
Okay.
Right? And interestingly, the base engine is on paper not as fuel efficient as the top spec engine. It's a slight difference of 1 kmpl or whatever. But despite having additional power, now this engine, the top spec TGDI, is a 130 horsepower engine.
Okay.
Right? I hadn't driven it earlier. It's been there for the last couple of years on the XUV, but we hadn't driven the XUV 300 earlier. So this is the top spec engine with more power. 130 horsepower is a lot.
Sounds
right?
fast, yeah.
Yeah, it's the most amount of power in this class. And it feels that way.
Okay.
Right? It's everything that you would imagine in terms of performance. In fact, the thought that hit me when I got in and drove this car was, it's electric. It reminded me of the 400 so much. I can't tell you.
Wow.
It was like, you get in, you just touch the throttle and it's like,
Oh, nice.
It goes. So, you know, outside office, it's slightly slow traffic and all of that. So immediately that hits you. Then you get out, you get on the highway, right? And over there, I remember the XUV 400 and this 3XO felt exactly the same.
That's nice.
In the sense that you put your foot down then, you get going, and it feels like endless torque.
Very
it
nice.
just keeps pulling you, right?
Nice.
So it, for me, instantly that connection was made between the two, and they've created that character here on the 3XO as well.
Traction control?
Not an issue. It has, of course, but it's not an issue.
Okay.
And in that regard, what our complaints with the 400 were initially, right, and continue to be even with the updated 400, was it felt a bit immature in the way it drove.
Yeah.
The suspension was too soft. Steering was too light, right? Now those things are not an issue with the 3XO.
Okay.
And the incredible part is that the 3XO is lighter than the 400.
Yeah.
It's lighter by 200 or something kilos because it
Yeah,
doesn't have the
electric
battery
to
pack,
IC,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. But still, the tune for the suspension here is better. It has a sense of firmness to it.
How?
Yeah, exactly. This is the tune. This is the experience in terms of driving dynamics that the 400 should have absolutely.
Yeah, and obviously they can't transfer the suspension over as is because there's a massive weight difference to account for. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this setup works. It's
Okay.
on the firmer side, but any time that we have to choose a suspension setup, a car, we'll pick the one that's firmer rather than the one that's softer.
Yeah.
Right? If there's a balance, we'll go to the side where it's firmer rather than softer, because the firmer suspension setup will be better in more conditions.
Also, if you assume that the suspension ages with time as you own this car, firmer will become acceptable perhaps over time. On the same time frame, softer will become unacceptable.
Yeah, and think about load conditions, right? In a car, you will go from having 80 kilos to having 80 into 5.
Correct.
Right? That's a lot of weight being added on.
Yeah.
And then there's luggage,
Yeah.
right? So the firmer suspension will be more versatile when you factor in all those conditions, right? So that's how we'd advise you to also think about
The
it.
diesel feels the same?
So the diesel is heavier. We drove the diesel manual, so the diesel feels heavier. But because of that, it just feels a little bit
More
nicer,
sedate.
right? A little bit more settled. It feels a little bit more plush, whereas in the petrol, it feels a little fidgety,
Okay.
right? It can feel a bit reactive. Nothing to worry about, but it feels a bit reactive over bumpy surfaces and all, whereas the diesel feels a little bit more
settled.
plush. Yeah.
Okay. This is generally because the diesel engine is heavier than a petrol engine. So you've got more weight on the front and more weight in the vehicle overall. And that can change your feeling from the suspension slightly. Some manufacturers will account for that and readjust the suspension for diesels and some don't.
Correct. So this, and they may well have, because this was a diesel manual, so they may have tuned it a little bit differently.
Sure.
But the point is that it felt like more in its Goldilocks zone, right? The 3XO compared to the petrol.
Okay.
Right? The petrol itself to drive, like I said, quick, immediate, impressive. Like, and this is the thing about Mahindras at times, right? There's this sense of childishness. Ki, why can't we do this?
Correct.
Right? Giving 130 horsepower. Did they need to? I mean, 120 is what the Sonnet is offering, and that's the upper end of the spectrum. They
Yeah,
could
and you
have
don't
gone-
think of the Sonnet as a slow car.
Yeah, and this could have been 122, 120, 130. Okay,
Yeah.
let's make this quick.
Yeah.
And in that also is the trade-off, because this is so obviously energetic that in the confines of the city, it gets in your way as well at times.
Okay.
Like, I enjoyed the quickness of it, but every now and then I was just like, oh man, the traffic's too slow. Oh, that's speed breakers. Why are there so many speed breakers? Right? Because you're invariably getting up to speed so quickly,
Right.
right? That you're just like, oh.
So could they have done driving modes or something and just given you a much calmer mode?
So it does have driving modes.
Okay.
So the same zip, zap, zoom that they've used.
Do they spell it with an X?
How will they do that?
XIP.
Zoom.
Yeah,
Zoom.
Hero has a
Zip,
scooter called the Zoom, which is spelled XOM. It's been done before.
Oh, right. It
Yeah.
could be zip, zap, zoom.
Yeah.
All right.
Easy.
We're hitting it out of the park today. Okay, so we did most of the driving in Zap, which is the mid, or let's just call it normal, everyday drive mode, and it's quick in that.
Okay.
Zoom is even quicker, and Zip is still quick. Right?
But even in Zip, you thought that the petrol would make you a little impatient with things around you?
So the thing is that it does have a little bit of what we call as the shunt. You know, like you just feel that, right?
Yeah.
that feeling. It does that at lower speeds.
Oh.
I think it's a combination of the turbo coming on, because until the turbo comes on, it'll be a little dull. And then you've gone on the gas and this thing wants to give all its torque in
Right.
all its glory. And then you lift off and it just...
So the step up in the turbo is noticeable.
The way it delivers the power, the way it drives is fine for the most part. But in city conditions, you will feel that slight suddenness.
And that's true for the automatic also, or just the manual?
I am talking about the automatic, because we only drove the turbo petrol automatic.
Because the autos can hide it sometimes.
So this is, interestingly, the gearbox on the Volkswagen Skodas for the 1-liter engines is an Aisin 6-speed. This is also an Aisin 6-speed. Is it jerky like that? I want to draw this because people were discussing this as well. As the same gearbox, it may or may not be. Does it feel as erratic as, does it feel as troublesome as that? No, it does not.
Okay.
It's just there. Is it the smoothest city car? No. And my concern with it for the city is also fuel efficiency, especially in cities like Mumbai and all. If you're in general, where narrower lanes, but there's not much traffic, so you're just driving at a lower speed more consistently, I don't think it should be a big issue. Okay. But in stop-go traffic, I think that is a question mark, in which we will have to figure out.
Okay, we'll do that at the view when the car comes for proper testing. Okay.
Correct. So that's my challenge with the petrol, right?
Okay.
I think it's a great setup. What they've done by offering that automatic with the base engine, which we've not driven and isn't, as per their claims, going to be as fuel efficient as this, but it's going to be significantly cheaper. So it's still good value. But what they're going to be like from a practical standpoint in the city is a question mark.
Okay.
Inherently, I understand as younger audiences, this will excite you, and by all means, go ahead for that. Is it going to be for everyone because of this enthusiasm? I don't think
Maybe
so.
Not.
Yeah, it needed to be a little bit calmer.
Okay.
Needed to be a little bit more practical for it to hit that spot.
Got it.
And again, talking about finesse, the drive mode button, it's that slim one, it pops up the menu when you first hit it. Then you think you have to use the touchscreen to change the modes. Actually, the button helps you switch as well, which is good. But after it's done with that, it's not that that menu disappears. So again, you have to go and hit the home button. Thankfully, there is a physical button which is accessible and makes it a little bit easier, but it's unnecessary. So there are these small things.
So it's exasperating.
Well done. So coming to the diesel also I drove, and what an impressive engine.
Okay.
Right? And this reminded me actually of the 700 in a way, because Mahindra went to town back then saying we have the 200 horsepower petrol, 200 horsepower petrol, and everybody was taken up by the petrol. And when we drove the petrol and the diesel, and to me, it was obvious that the engine that I preferred in the 700 was the diesel.
Okay.
Right? It used that torque and power better. Was it the quicker engine in a straight line? No, but was it the more usable engine?
No, but the quicker engine is important, Kartik, because the XUV 700 is a race car.
X factor, right? So, where was I, man?
You're talking about how you prefer the diesel in the XUV 700, and then you have a similar feeling about the 3XO.
So it has that lag under 1500 RPM, but from 1500 RPM, it again pulls. In nature, it's similar to the petrol, that it's enthu. There's no two ways about it. The way it pulls is just wow.
Exuberant.
Yeah. Yeah, exuberant is right. The clutch is long, so traffic will get
some amount of suffering is there with the manual.
It will will load you up, right? It's not overly heavy, but it is not
It is
light.
work.
It is, yeah, it is work, absolutely. So I enjoyed driving it.
Would you recommend diesels today?
So we have that caution always, right, for
That's
diesels. With the newer diesel engines, they have to work harder to get cleaner emissions. So those treatment systems, the exhaust gas treatment systems, require the vehicle to be driven, like let's say one common one is to drive it for 30 minutes above 3000 RPM, right, or 2000 RPM or something like that, continuously, so that there's that exhaust gas treatment system that needs to clean up, right? So for many vehicles, this is required, right? And so low speed regular usage is not ideal. diesels need to be run out on the highway
Got it.
on a regular basis for them to run clean now.
See, you should get a 3XO diesel so that you can tell your family members that no, I have to go and drive the car for the car's sake. It had nothing to do with me, and you're free to join. And that way, the whole family goes for a picnic. I think it's a great idea.
So for me, actually, if you're thinking about the 3XO, invariably I'm thinking you have to be somebody who's traveling on the highway, who likes to drive enthusiastically, right? And in that sense, the diesel again makes sense. If you're going to be spending more time, if you're going to be covering more kilometers, the diesel will make sense because it is more fuel efficient, right? Whether it's the city or the highway, it will be more fuel efficient. Even in the city, I've seen that the diesel did way better. The petrol was in single digits, right?
And that's because you're saying these petrols aren't too frugal, but the diesels are as normal, and therefore the delta is big enough. Okay.
So it's the diesel managed in this similar kind of scenario where the petrol was doing single digits. Diesel was around 15 in similar conditions, right? So it makes a lot of sense for the city, provided, of course, that you're also spending time on the highway. And if you're spending time on the highway, 100% the diesel will make more sense.
Understood.
And if you're thinking about the fun factor of driving, the diesel has it in abundance.
Right.
It's also smooth. It's also refined.
Right.
So it's not in any ways a compromise in terms of the driving experience.
Yeah. Unless you live in a city where they legislate diesels out 10 years, 15 years later, in which case obviously you'll have a big rethink.
And that is a question mark, and that question mark is a worry enough. Agreed. But new diesels, I think 10 years, let's assume that that is a safe bet.
So what's the suspension like? Comfortable car? Or because you keep saying exuberant, enthusiastic, so I'm now wondering if it handles bad roads.
So yeah, unlike some complaints that we've had about Mahindras in the past, where they set it up too soft, right? That's not the case here. Like we said, it's on the firmer side, and that's good. That's fantastic. This is something that we'd like to see on the 400 Scorpio and 400 as well, right?
Can we have a Scorpio X with firmer suspension?
Yeah, why not? Go for it. If that's what the X stands for, go for it.
Yeah.
So this setup works, right? In the city, it's comfy enough. On the highway, it's composed enough. Driving it faster, and it's easy to drive it faster. Even around bends, you'll find that it sits composed. Is it out and out enthusiastic on this front? I did not. How I would say is that even when I did drive it hard, right? Did I come out of any corner smiling, saying, "Oh"? Did I feel like it was fast? Yeah, I did. But did I come out saying that, wow, I felt connected to the car? That didn't quite happen.
Steering
is all right. I don't have an issue with the steering per se. But do I feel connected to the car? It's doing its work. It's going quickly. It's doing that, traveling fast for me when I ask of it. It's doing it with enough composure that I'm not thinking
so
too much
capable,
about.
But you're not thinking of it as an enthusiast car.
Correct. So the highlight of the engine is not connecting with the chassis as well, right? That it's going to be on the highway, that's going to spend more time there. That the engine and suspension, they are working well enough for.
Got it.
They're managing to deliver you a car to you which is confident, quick, capable, and can do all this all day long. So good for that. But is it out and out right now? The 130 horsepower figure is going to make people think, oh, this is the fun to drive car.
Yeah, only in a straight line, which gets boring pretty quickly actually.
Again, it's confident. Did it make me sit up and say, wow, this is everybody who wanted an Abarth at one point, or wanted an SUV N-line with a lot of punch like this in this segment? Is this it?
Yeah, okay, understood. Fair enough.
So that's that.
Electronics, driving electronics? ABS?
So ADAS. I mean, the systems. Oh yeah, the brakes were good, right? The brakes were good. As we got to higher speeds, you realize that the brakes, instead of feeling like, that you need more effort, in fact, felt like they needed less effort. You just need a light tap and you get nice, strong braking. So good brakes. Really enjoyed that. That left an impression. Tires, like I said, 17-inch. So good.
Is there a 4x4 version of this?
No.
Kabhi bhi nahi tha?
No, it's got 4x4 time. So no 4x4 on this.
So the Jimny is safe?
Yeah. Jimny is
as safe as it's gonna get.
It's in a class of one, quite literally. So that this Thar's job to take on the Jimny, not the XUV. So this is city friendly, highway friendly, corner friendly. It's friendly enough.
Okay, so what would be a reason not to buy this car? In what situation would you automatically say, okay, great, but don't consider the XUV 3XO?
So right, like I said, if you are planning to use this for your family on a regular basis, so people are spending time in the back seat for longer distances,
not a great car for that.
Not enough support. The seats, that's always been the case. The seats have been low, continues to be low. And, is it wide? Yes, it's wide. So shorter distances, even 3 people in the back, okay.
Yeah. And how's the Mahindra service experience?
So Mahindra's service experience, has we've seen, is not niggle free, but it's not a problem either. And they're known for giving you spares, affordable spares, and fairly reliable service.
Okay.
Right? I don't think that is a red flag in any way.
Okay.
Is it the ideal? Is it the
it's not a green flag, but it's certainly not a red flag.
It's not a red flag.
Okay.
I don't have, reliability, service, these are things, when I'm thinking of Mahindra, I'm thinking that, yeah, you're going to have to deal with some issues, some niggles, but is it going to be a reason to not buy one? No, that's not a flag that I'm raising at all with this.
Okay. Safety? Yeah.
Safety, this will be that 5-star rated.
So it should be a reasonably safe car from the off. Structure has already been, this structure is the same as the previous structure, and the previous structure already did well on a crash test somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. It was already 5-star rated.
What are these cars' natural rivals?
So the sub 4 meter segment, so which is your Nexon, Brezza, Sonnet, Kiger,
the usual.
Magnite, yeah, the long list. So they have, so I bring up Kiger Magnite as well, because the value quotient on this, especially the lower variants, is very strong. And that's a space that's been dominated, I would think, by the Magnite and the Kiger, both of which are siblings, right? And this is the first time we're seeing something else offer you good hardware in terms of the engine, in terms of the size of the vehicle, in terms of the transmission, which becomes a great package within a similar price range.
Okay.
Right? So.
All right. What else?
65 watt USB charging port up front. Paddle shifters, no. I did want paddle shifters, I felt at times. Oh yeah, talking about the gearbox, paddle shifters and gearbox. Gearbox is quick and smooth, so not a problem. But sporty, again, no.
Okay.
Not that
so
kind of
kickdowns are a little slow.
Yeah. It's not slow. It's just that it's not
as quick as the engine, therefore a little slow.
Yeah. So it's just not as on point, like when you're asking for the downshift, like you'd want. Would I call it slow? No. But is it as immediate?
Just so slow.
It's not slow. That's not slow.
I'm not slow in the sense of glacial. It's slow in the sense of I'm expecting a quicker response and it's not giving
slower than your expectations.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Expectation is the big word there.
Yeah. So that's just it. Those are the small things, right? That slight lack of feel from the steering, that slight gap in the
it sounds like a practical, reasonably well-made car, but not the most mature car, because there's lots of small things that could have created a much superior experience, which have fallen by the wayside.
Correct.
Okay.
So I think time for quick summary. Yeah. No?
Let's do this. So the Mahindra XUV 300, which is basically a Samsung Tivoli, which is the XUV 400.
No, Sangyong.
Sorry, Samsung bola kya? Okay, time for the quick summary. So the history of this car. This is a Sangyong Tivoli, which is almost exactly the same size as the XUV 400. But when Mahindra tried to fit that under the sub 4 meter for the excise cut, that's when they created the 300. That car has been updated and they've changed one of the O's to an X. I'm going to let you guess which O in the name has become an X. So the XUV 3XO, it's basically a midlife facelift, and think of it as a bug fix. So for example, we've always said this was a wide car. So 3 people sitting in the second row, they'd be very comfortable in terms of space, but the seat themselves are mediocre. That remains the same. But the exterior has been updated. It's a little bit flashy. You will notice it. And I didn't get the impression that Kartik really enjoyed the styling. But if you think about the fact that the 300 was difficult to consider, it wouldn't occur to you that this was an option for you in a segment that has some very big names like the Kia Sonnet or the Magnite or the Kiger, etc. Nexon. This car would now occur to you as an option, which is a big achievement for this car. And that's why the styling is on the flashy side. Will you like it? Will you think of it as tasteful? Perhaps not, but it will stay in your head. The best angle of the car, though, is the back, which is where the 3XO badge is. So I'm not sure that that's such a bad thing, but flashier car. Now, on the inside, similarly, If you looked at the 300 before this, you'd say that the cabin felt old-fashioned and not so cool. That's what Mahindra's worked on. So you get the twin digital screens from, say, the XUV 700 downscale to whatever. There's some confusion about CarPlay and Android Auto. Some certifications are done, some is pending, full confusion. Forget that. But you've got nice, comfortable seats for the driver. You've got updated displays. And Kartik had pointed out earlier that these cars have a weird way to organize the buttons, where certain buttons are really large and others are really tiny. That kind of slightly confusing stuff remains, but materials have been chosen better and it does look a cooler cabin. And this has always been a spacious car. So when you get in, you will notice in both rows there's a lot of space. But remember, we said that Tivoli was chopped down. What you lost was the boot. So this is a relatively narrow boot. It's a high boot. You can still use it. It will do a fair amount of heavy lifting for you, but it's not a generous, abundantly spacious boot for you at all. The other side, which has not changed also, is the chassis structure. This was already a structure that tested well in crash tests earlier. No changes on that front. Suspension works reasonably well. You will be comfortable. It is set up on the firmer side though, which to us is a good thing, because as you load the car up, say on a weekend trip with the family, or as the car ages, it will remain in an acceptable, comfortable place. Whereas if they'd made it softer, it would just get worse and worse until you felt like it was just bouncing around on springs and there were no dampers left, right? So it's a good thing. It's a stiff car. You will be reasonably comfortable, no doubt about it. You get the choice of 3 engines, a base turbo petrol, a torque turbo petrol, and a turbo diesel. These can be had with automatics in all 3 cases. There's a 6-speed auto at the bottom, there's a 6-speed auto at the top, but there is an AMT in the middle.
For the diesel.
If you buy the diesel with the manual, Kartik says watch out for the clutch on your test drive. It can feel a little bit long and therefore like a little bit of work, although it's not a deal breaker, it's just a little bit extra effort. And the automatic actually works really well. Kartik was hoping that the gear changes, especially in kickdown, were a little bit quicker. And I'll tell you why he's thinking like that. It's not because the gearbox itself is slow, it's because the engines are really quick. So we've not driven the base turbo petrol, but the top turbo petrol makes 130 bhp, which makes it amongst the most powerful cars, if not the most powerful car in the segment. And it is an exuberant, enthusiastic engine. You will enjoy driving it, especially out on the highway. And when you're driving like that, you'll keep wishing that the kickdowns happened a little bit earlier. Kartik even mentioned maybe paddle shifters would have helped the experience a little bit. So it is a fast car, the top petrol. The diesel is a nice settled car, which actually Kartik rated slightly better than the turbo petrol, in the sense of it feels like all the parts work together better on the diesel than on the petrol. The petrol is always sort of like in a hurry and it makes you a little impatient in the city. And Mahindra has made lots of small misses that don't complete the experience fully. For example, paddle shifters would have helped the gearbox on the top model for the enthusiasm. Steering feedback and a little bit more feel from the chassis. It's a competent chassis around corners, but it's not an enthusiastic chassis around corners, but the engine is. So there's a little bit of small disconnects here and there that reduce the experience a little bit. But overall, I can tell that he is really impressed with the 3XO for what it is. And this is before we talk about the value quotient of this car, because the prices start at 7.5 lakh rupees, go up to what? 12.
No, that'll be about 15.
And the prices go up to about 15, and even the base variants in there, the equipment levels, etc., is really good, and they look like very powerful value options.
Yeah.
So Mahindra's made sure that the previous problem was, I didn't even remember the 300 was there when I bought an SUV in this class. Now it will be kind of hard to ignore the fact that the 3XO is out there. If you're an enthusiastic driver thinking about the 130 bhp engine, Kartik has a fairly serious warning in there saying don't think about it as an all-out sporty car. It is an enthusiastic car. It will drive fast, but it doesn't feel like a sports car when you drive it. It just feels like a car with a fast engine.
And also the bigger flag there is about the city use.
And in the city, that fast engine is slightly harder to use because it's always a little bit too exuberant. It's got 3 driving modes, and even in the lowest mode, you'll still feel the same way. So Mahindra could have created a much calmer base mode. So you would have a very, very city-oriented mode, which hasn't happened. Or you'll have to relearn how you drive and just be a lot more patient. This is also aggravated by the fact that there is a little bit of nod that comes from the turbo spooling up and spooling off. It's not terrible, but you will notice it. It also interrupts your flow a little bit. And finally, this car loves to beep, chime and talk to you. And it really, really annoyed Kartikeya. And that is perhaps to me, the part of the experience that you'll probably enjoy the least, because you cannot turn off all of these warnings. That's the law. You can change the tones on some of these warnings, and you can control the volumes on some of these. But between the ADAS doing its own thing, the exterior sensors for the parktronic, etc., doing their own thing, etc., this is a really noisy, beepy, chimey car. And if you're taking a test ride, I would tell you to pay attention to this too, because a car that talks to you this much will constantly be in your face about these warnings. I don't know that so many warnings were needed or not, but I'm just saying I'd like a quiet cabin. And that begins with the engine being isolated from me and the world being isolated, but it also means that the car doesn't constantly try to talk to me. I do that all the time and I know that that's annoying. Was that a good summary?
Excellent. While you were talking, it struck me, the combination of that enthusiastic base engine with that great price tag and a great automatic, actually for younger buyers, who are looking for their first car.
Yeah.
This would be an interesting combination.
We just haven't driven that car, which is why he's making a little bit of a guess here that it should work. When we test the base engine, then we'll be a lot more confident about it.
So even then, the fuel efficiency not being great and all those kind of things which people are willing to make a compromise on, especially when they're making an emotional purchase decision, that's an interesting option aside from the diesel.
Yeah, so decent equipment, decent engine, gearbox, enthusiastic car, good suspension. Sounds like something that might work out,
Yeah. All right.
What happens next for Mahindra now?
What happens next from Mahindra?
7XO.
So we do have later in the year, the 700 electric.
How will they name it?
Oh, but before
7EO.
Before that is the 15th August will come.
Oh yeah. How did they launch this car and it was not a national holiday?
They slipped.
Oh, it's not important enough to warrant a national holiday. Is Mahindra aware that launching a car on a national holiday is technically criminal because you're not supposed to be working on that day by law?
Is it true?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The national holiday law is very clear that you have to shut your office and go home.
Oh.
So Mahindra employees are definitely working on that day, few of them that are doing the launch thing. And all the journalists who show up are also working. So in theory, if the police were to show up, everybody gets arrested.
Are you serious?
Then they spend the rest of the national holiday.
If somebody actually knows about this, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, no. So then this whole group does the rest of the press conference in the jail, and then the next day after the public holiday is over, everybody's released to go home. I think it'd be damn funny.
Thanks, man. Guess who doesn't want to go for that now?
No. Whether you go or not is very clear. I am very clear that I will not attend a press conference on a public holiday because there are 1,000 other ways to celebrate Independence Day, for example, none of which involve Mahindra as far as I'm concerned. So sitting on Mahatma Gandhiji's birthday, sitting on the Independence Day, I think this is just stupid. Okay, and I am an Indian company, and therefore I must pay the patriotism card. Listen, you're an Indian company every single day. It doesn't take a national holiday for you to remember it. And I've done my part for all the journalists who hate working on national holidays.
Alrighty.
Yeah, is that?
Any more questions?
No, I'm good.
I'm good too.
All right. Thank you so much for watching MotorInc First. If you have any more questions about the Mahindra, about the 3XO, about any other X or anything else, leave us a comment. We'll try and get you an answer. MotorInc First is available audio only on Apple, Google, Amazon and Spotify. Just be careful with the Google subscriptions. They're shutting them down in June. So next month onwards, you start having to look for a new place to listen to podcasts with. We might have a solution to that, but we'll discuss that at some other point. Thank you so much for watching.